Welcome to Zero to Start, a podcast about immersive development that brings you inspiring conversations with XR creators, developers, and industry leaders. I'm your host, Ceciliana Trevino. Subscribe to Zero to Start on your favorite podcast platform and follow our podcast page on LinkedIn. Former NASA AI scientist turned VR creative director and producer, Nathalie Mathe has been pushing the boundaries of VR since the early days of the Oculus DK1 and DK2. From creating visual effects on blockbuster films like Total Recall, Fast and Furious 6, Skyfall, and The Dark Knight Rises, to directing and post-supervising cutting-edge VR projects for Google, Facebook, Jump VR, and Condition One, Nathalie is a powerhouse of innovation and artistry. Nathalie is also the founder of NativeVR, an independent VR studio in California. On today's episode, Nathalie shares how her Hollywood work propelled her to the forefront of pioneering techniques in photogrammetry and 360 video to create groundbreaking entertainment and social impact stories, including U-Turn, her award-winning interactive VR comedy that raises awareness of the gender gap in tech. We explore her professorship at Northeastern University's College of Art, Media, and Design, where she's currently teaching in the Game Science and Design Master's program at Mills College. And Nathalie offers her advice for aspiring creators looking to break into the rapidly evolving industry. Let's get started. Welcome, Nathalie. It's so great to have you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Cece, for inviting me.
We go way back, and I am always really excited to get a chance to talk to you because you worked on the first VR experience that I had ever tried, which was the North Face demo, and we'll get to that. But I wanted to ask you, what was your first aha moment with VR?
Yeah, actually, it goes back to the summer of 2013, 10 years ago, when I was visiting San Francisco. And I went to one of the first meetup. I remember VR meetup. It was in an artist studio in the hills of San Francisco, maybe like 30 people. And that's where I saw like the new headsets coming out and some cool first applications. And that's also where I met the first startup that I did some remote work with. So it was a very productive and insightful evening. The reason why it struck me, it's because, I suddenly saw this possibility of combining everything I loved, which was both like storytelling and computers and interactive and visual. So yeah, it was kind of a haha moment, this first meetup.
Incredible too, because you have such a rich experience in visual effects. Can you tell us about your transition from visual effects, working on Hollywood's biggest blockbusters like Total Recall and The Fast and the Furious, into VR?
Yeah, it was not such a difficult transition because, in fact, in visual effects, I had been working in visual effects for the past 10 or 12 years, and the last few years really specializing in matte painting and especially like projection mapping for 3D matte painting. Matte painting is when you paint a background or modify an existing background or destroy it or add extensions to it and reproject it on 3D geometry so that it can be filmed by the camera from different angles, not just from like one point of view, like a 2D matte painting traditional. So I had some experience already of like combining different angles and different multiple camera takes. I had worked like on Fast and Furious 6 on the sequence for the big canyon in the Canaries where we took a helicopter and shot like hundreds of photos, and I had to combine them together to do a matte painting projection, 3D projection on the 3D canyon. So we kind of already were using like photogrammetry and combining images and all of this and doing like, some stereo also and 3D work. So basically transitioning to 360 video, which was, I didn't transition into the full interactive, Unity and Unreal type of gaming. It was first with 360 stereographic video and those experimental cameras that were being developed. So I told them, look, I'm just going to try to apply the knowledge that I have to compute these spherical, stereographic views that you want. I told them, like, give me a week or two and I will come up with some template in Nuke and trying to figure out how to stitch all those cameras together. And that's what happened. I didn't tell them I know how to do it. I just said, with my existing knowledge, it shouldn't be such a big deal. So that was kind of the transition, applying like everything I had learned from visual effects to combining those kind of dozens of images, videos, not really static images, but videos, to be able to, it was still not easy. And at the time there was no automated tools, we had to do everything by hand. That led to down the road developing tools in Nuke that were later on became, commercial tools like Nuke VR and working with the foundry to fine tune those tools. So that's kind of how it all started.
So it was a natural evolution. You were there and the timing came where it was a natural progression.
Yeah, it just seemed like a good fit. And I had also learned from previously transitioning in my career that it's best to find, the areas where your skills can transition rather than starting from scratch, from zero, which is much harder. So if I had wanted to do like some interactive gaming in Unity, it would have been much harder because I didn't know Unity at the time, or I didn't know about, interactive storytelling. So going through 360 video storytelling was like the easier path for me. And at the time, they didn't have many artists like me out there who could do this kind of work. So it was kind of an obvious match for them too.
How did making some of those early demos and pioneering those tools, how did that change the game for you, or did it?
Well, it was a lot of like experimentation. Those cameras that we were using at the beginning, depending on the startup, there was Condition 1 and then there was Jaunt VR, but they were using different camera, from RED professional camera to kind of GoPros prototype at the time. So there were a lot of challenges to just like stitch all those images together and understanding like the conditions under which you could shoot something, at which distance, when did it create a problem. So it was a lot of back and forth and experimenting, and the more you shoot, the better you understand like what you should not do so that you can stitch those images and the stereo is going to work, and all of this kind of, it was incremental improvement. And at the same time, when I was working at Jaunt, they were trying to build an automated tool to stitch all the stereo videos together. So there was also a lot of back and forth between us trying to use what they had come up with and trying to make it work better. So in a sense, it was a bit different than working on films where, you're really focusing on the final product and the image and the pixels. Here, it was more of a process of developing the tools as we were also producing content for clients as well, or just to, sometimes just to test the tools. But it allowed me to meet like tons of different people, to work from like commercials to documentary style to music, concert videos, all kind of different videos that we did. So there was like a really high turnaround compared to films where it's much slower, and lots of different genres and lots of trials to see what this like immersive 360 video could be good at. So it was a lot of learning for everyone and kind of fast-paced sometimes to stay on top.
I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about your groundbreaking work at that time, your film U-Turn.
So U-Turn came after like I started that in 2016. So after I had gained, some experience for the last 3 years working with many projects, I decided to finally, create my own and be a creator and not just a producer or post-producer or visual effects. So U-turn came at a time when, after I did like a burnout in Silicon Valley and working for some of those startups who are not always very woman friendly, to be clear. And U-turn was kind of a creative way of showing the story of a woman working in tech on an everyday basis, using the immersive and personal connections that you can have with this medium by putting the viewer in the shoes of a woman working in tech. So the idea from the beginning was to develop some immersive story that will appeal to men as well, because like women didn't need to be educated about those issues. It was more for my male colleagues. And when I was talking to guys, they really didn't get it. Oftentimes, like most of them had kind of good intentions, but really the culture and the ways of working and the assumptions in Silicon Valley were, not very woman friendly. So that's why I had this idea of making it first person. So you embody someone, either a man or a woman, in the story, giving the ability to choose to the viewer at any point. They can change the point of view of the story by just turning their body around. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Well, two stories at once.
yeah, it's two stories at once. It's two half sphere, two 180. At the time, 180 didn't even exist. So, we split the sphere in half and you just turn around your body to be able to shift point of views. And the audio was designed so that it would help you. You can overhear a little bit what was happening in the background in a very natural way. So it was like a combination of like, yes, a new mechanism to do some kind of interactive, storytelling, let the user choose, and everyone watched it differently. We did some tests afterwards or even showing it at festival and stuff. Definitely there is not one way of watching it, and that's what people enjoyed, and that was the idea, is that at the end, people can compare what they saw, they can compare what they missed, and it's like in real life, you don't have the same point of view on the story based on what you are able to listen to or watched. So yeah, it was kind of an experimental setup, and at the same time, if I had known, it's always the same story. If I had known when I started it that it was going to be so much work and so much money involved and complicated, maybe I would not have done it. So I kind of learned on the go and building my team and trying to find funding and not getting funding and still, working with some great companies. We got some support from post-production companies to stitch the images, to do some of the visual effects. There was a lot of screen insertions that needed to happen. All the sound design was custom made. So it was a good timing, because also many of those studios at the time, they wanted to experiment with 360 videos, so we were giving them the opportunity to practice with our footage and our sound, and they were given the opportunity to learn, so we could get some work done at the discount price because they were interested. So it was, very good timing in terms of being at the early stage of development of the medium, so that we found enough people interested to help.
It was so technically challenging, even for that time. It was very sophisticated given the tools available. So yeah, the level of work, I just can't even imagine how challenging it is to run two stories simultaneously.
Yeah, it took several months. Yeah, definitely. The shooting was fast, but the post-production took months. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the onboarding? Because I think that was pretty unique for U-turn as well. It's just like you're not just showing them a new experience, they have to learn how to use the medium or how to view the film.
Yeah, yeah. And we had these short tutorials at the beginning, because after showing it at festivals, many times, and basically, giving demos and explaining and explaining and explaining, we decided, okay, if we are going to put it online, and release it for even more festivals, let's come up with a tutorial at the beginning to onboard people and make it easy to understand. Because by default, most people don't turn around much, even with 360 video, and they are not used to have something happening in the back. So we designed this tutorial that was mostly audio based, because we wanted to be able to explain to people how to use the audio to watch U-turn, to be able to detect that something was happening in the back. And it's only if you turn your head enough to the side that you start hearing what's happening in the back. Otherwise, having like both sides of the story being told on top of each other would be totally confusing. So we had this binaural spatial audio design that would allow. So we did a short animated tutorials, because we realized that if we had visuals on top of sound, people were getting overwhelmed. It was just too much. So we did very simple graphics just to show them some animation going on each side, and then they could listen and learn how to turn around and listen to the different audios for each animation. So that was how this tutorial came about, after first of all, showing it to people many times in real life settings, and then learning what was the most important to teach them on how to listen and turn around. And yeah, the whole interactivity of U-turn is based on the sound, which was unique at the time.
You recently joined Northeastern University at Mills College. What can you tell us about the Game Science and Design MS program?
Yeah, so Northeastern University has had this Game Science and Design Master program, and they also have an undergrad gaming program at Boston, where the main university is. But last year, they bought the Mills College campus in Oakland. So they started this new program of the Game Science and Design Master program in Oakland as well. So it had been going on for 10 years in Boston, and for the first time in Oakland last year. And that's when I was hired to teach as part of this program. And this is a very well developed master program that teaches students not just about game design, but the science part means how do I design a study to evaluate the impact of a game. And this can be for playtesting, this can be for testing whether your game has a specific social impact, or whether a game community is healthy in terms of harassment and all those kind of things that can happen in game communities. How do you analyze some specific issues, or how do you ask questions and find ways to develop qualitative or quantitative studies to be able to answer those questions. So those are very important when you design games. It's not just how to design, but how to evaluate the impact of your game. So that's what is part of this master. And we had the first cohort of students last year, and we are getting a new cohort in Oakland starting in September. And in addition to that program, Northeastern is also one of the first university to start extended reality master program. So it's a XR, VR, MR, AR program. That's same thing. It's starting in Boston this year. We have been teaching classes in XR for several years, but finally there was a full program designed specializing in XR, and it's going to be a multidisciplinary program, that in the sense that yes, it's XR, but applied to whatever, business, training, medical science, all kind of other colleges. It's a very interdisciplinary approach. And we have already piloted also some classes in Oakland this year, and I will teach more XR classes next year. And then the master, which is starting in Boston, will also start in Oakland, but in 2025. So they are kind of, doing it in stages. But definitely in Oakland, we have this brand new computer lab. We have an XR lab with HTC Vives, Oculus Quest, and other kind of experimental headsets. We have a biometrics lab where we can measure all kind of biometrics from the players. So it's starting very well, and Northeastern is really committed, and it's coming from the top level of the dean and higher up in the university to really develop XR for the future and for the students, especially in the Bay Area with all the companies there. We also want students to get internships. That's a big part of the program.
It's so important to be able to have that advantage of the degree combined with the emphasis on the scientific approaches that really fill in the gap for the power that this medium has. So you can really tap into impacts that you're having with what you're building.
Yeah, because, it's easy to just look at the development side and say, we are just going to teach them how to use Unity. But really, they don't need a master degree for that. They can go online, tons of YouTube videos. And, if that's just the goal, or, there are some intensive boot camps where you can learn Unities and how to code. But yeah, the idea is more like to encompass, to have some idea of the history of the medium, how it came about, what's the specific impact, what makes it different from other traditional gaming or video game environments, and how it can be used, and yes, how do you measure its impact? So all the reflections, and how do you make ethical use of it, because I totally believe that nowadays we have to teach students at the design level what's going to be their impact, the impact of the tools, of the stories, of the games, whatever it is that they are going to be creating later on. It's really important to learn some responsible tech development and not reproduce all the mistakes that have been made with previous tech.
Yeah, and speaking of ethics, I'm curious how the development of AI is impacting your classroom.
Well, I think the approach, like in the industry and at the university level, is a bit different. But definitely, what we are trying to teach the students is, like, if they are going to use those tools, how can they do it in a way that is ethical and responsible? We have very strict plagiarism, for example, policies, and that applies to AI as well, which means that, if they use something that has been generated by AI somewhere in their work, they should be transparent about it. They should cite it as a source, like any other source, that they have used in their work. It's especially true when, writing essays. And I've been confronted with some cases with my students where I had to clarify with them, because some of them also are non-English speaking students, and they believe that, if I use AI, my essay is going to be better. But frankly, when I read something that's been written by AI, I can tell right away, and it's overly generalistic. It's overly repeating stuff that is not very personal reflection. And I tend to ask my student for more personal reflection, or more how did I experience that? How did that work for me or not? And the AI cannot answer that for you. So yeah, it's both teaching them that I want to hear their personal voices. I don't want to hear some generic stuff that, I already know, and encouraging them to write their own reflections on their work. Self-reflection is important. It's not just testing their knowledge or something like that. And then also leaving some room for, the students who are not fully comfortable with English. And sometimes the automated translation stuff, uses AI, and it shows up to me as written by AI, when in fact they were just trying to improve their English. So it's kind of a fine line, between letting them use it to have better English versus letting them use it to write from scratch. And once you get to know the student, it's easier to tell also whether it's their personal voice or not, what you are reading. But it definitely takes extra work on my side. That's not always a very beneficial from this point of view because it takes more time. You have to be more aware. In terms of like 3D content, so far, yeah, some of them I've used it to have like maybe some 3D character, being able to talk in a game or something like that, generating some voice. But they are also well practiced into reusing 3D assets from the stores and the markets, and they are used to, mention where did those come from. So you just have to be very specific with the assignment. Like, do you allow them to take stuff from other places, or do you want them to create something from scratch that is really their own? So there are like different levels, but definitely you have to be very specific in the assignment. And in the end, it's like, what are you trying to teach them, and how do they show that they have learned something? How do they show it to you? But it's more like developing methods and practices to be transparent and honest about the use of AI.
Tell us about the other innovative programs you're developing to increase skills, resilient leadership, and neurodiversity.
This is something a little bit outside of my current job, but I've been volunteering with the neurodivergent SIG group that is part of IGDA, the International Game Developer Association. We started a SIG group last year, and there are only a few groups that do exist in the industry, realizing that the percentage of neurodivergent folks in the industry is very high, but there is very little support existing, except some like employee support group that have been started in some specific companies. So there is like a high demand in the industry. And this all started with GDC and me meeting some people, and I've been having different times in my life when I've been struggling with mental health issue. I had to learn, from my own burnout, how to become more resilient and more grounded and being able to still do like interesting work despite all the stress and demands. It's partly like what I've learned myself, and also being able to share it and teach other people about it. So right now, we have like a few hundred people, neurodivergent people in this SIG. We are starting discussions. We might roll out some workshops or some, training. But it's mostly like right now a moral support and advocacy group. And definitely I would like to roll in, some practices in my classes as well, because my whole life experience, I can see that in education, we teach only to the head, we teach to the brain, but we don't teach how to be, we don't teach, what your body can teach you, what is emotional regulation and all of that. Or maybe in some, elementary classrooms now they do it. And I saw you are going to face challenges in life. And with COVID, I saw my students really struggling with their mental health. That was kind of the factor that, and I was struggling too. It was difficult to teach online and to see all the students, some of them not even being able to produce any homework or think because they were so overwhelmed. For some of them, it was like the first major crisis in their life. So that's when I realized, oh my gosh, we are really missing some fundamental education there to teach people how to be human beings and how to function in a world, especially younger people, in a world that's going to face multiple crises. And we are already facing multiple crises. So how can you become more embodied? How can you become better at managing your emotions, not controlling them, but learning how to deal with them and doing some personal development. So I think that also because of XR is such an immersive medium, we are not even taking advantage in XR of all those embodied possibilities. I'm still exploring like what's the best way to teach those through movements, through games, through, all kind of different approaches. But definitely the body has to be involved as much as the brain. That's what I would like to bring to education in the next few years and to immersive media as well.
What were some early risks that you took that paid off?
Sometimes I think I've been a bit crazy because, decided to quit my job in London when I came to San Francisco and discovered the first VR headsets, and calling them and just saying, "Hey, I'm not coming back," was a bit risky.
So you went to the meetup in San Francisco, you saw this headset, then you just decided you were going to stay here and not go back to work in London?
Yes. I was on vacation. I was not supposed to stay. Yeah, definitely. I was on a months-long vacation, and it ended up being like 3 months, and then whatever, having to find the right kind of visa and all kind of like legal stuff to be able to stay. But yeah, that was the decision. I just saw that my future was in San Francisco. Things were happening, and I decided to jump the boat. But at the time, I had already, it didn't come like out of the blue. I had already been interested in interactive media and especially interactive art. I was learning like touch designer or other type of ways of telling stories or interacting with users. So it was not just like in the spur of the moment. It was something that had been cooking for a long time, and it just seemed to like crystallize, in this moment. That was like the confirmation, like, yes, I have to be there. That's where things are. The future is being written. And that was like my feeling at the time. And sometimes you just know it's the right decision to take, And I didn't think of all the consequences, but definitely it was the right decision at the right time. And yeah, same thing for visual effects. When I decided to change my career to visual effects from like being a scientific researcher in AI at the time in the 90s at NASA, this was a big shift as well, but I never regretted it. I think I have a very good sense of intuition and what's right for me. Those were some like bold decisions that sometimes people in my family or friends didn't really understand, but they were right for me at the time. When you know something is right, there might be all kind of obstacles coming, later, but you just know you're on the right path. So it's kind of hard to explain.
That's pretty exciting that you had the courage to chart your own way despite even what people close to you say, because that can be a little bit difficult sometimes, standing in your own truth.
Yes, definitely. But that's one of the things I learned from, doing more artistic. After my kind of scientific education, I went already into more artistic explorations, and that's what I had to learn at the time. Is like your choices are not always reasonable, rational choices. Sometimes it's just your intuition or your heart knows, and there is no rational explanation for it. Yeah, I am highly intuitive, and I just knew this was the right thing to do. And definitely, no one really expected it. But yeah, I like to take chances. And definitely my life has been an interesting path of like changing directions a few times. But for everything I've gained like so much wisdom, I feel, and I've learned to navigate. I feel very well equipped to tackle any challenge nowadays. I gave this presentation in the neurodivergence SIG, and I told people like, this is how you learn to ride the big waves. And I love this sentence. It's like, at some point you become a big wave rider and you are not afraid of them anymore.
What's your advice for beginner immersive developers and storytellers as they build their skills?
In terms of skills, the basics are definitely Unity is the default kind of tools. Learning to develop interactive content. Unreal is also a very good and different game engines and interactive tool, a bit less used for VR or, except the high-end experiences and the tethered headsets still nowadays, but extremely good and interesting. So either one of those, is important to master. But more important, I would say, is to educate yourself, because now there's been like 10 years, and I'm not counting like the early experiences before the new headset came out, but there is a lot of immersive work that was developed before. But even just the last 10 years, like look at the most popular games, look at the storytelling that has been awarded at festivals like Tribeca, Cannes. There are a lot of good examples out there of what works, what doesn't work. So it's not just a matter of like developing another shooter games, it's really like understanding what are the unique capabilities of this medium to put someone in a place where they couldn't be, or in the shoes of someone else, or to create more intimacy, or to take advantage of all the embodiment and the movements and the gesture that you can do in this medium. So it's really, trying to understand what has been done and what is cutting edge nowadays, all the practical aspects and the storytelling potential of this medium. And in order to get a job, network and build a portfolio. Even if your portfolio is not the most beautiful, like if you can come up with some original ideas, or, show how you can do things a bit differently than other people, that's important. But go to conferences and network, and that's the best way to find a job and develop your skills. But don't hesitate to, like, I remember some of my students who went to GDC, they were like, oh, this was surprising. Some of those companies, they were showing demos of stuff that was not really finished, or well done. And I'm like, yeah, that's okay. You can show stuff even if it's not like fully polished. It did encourage them so that next year they will have something to show of their own that, might not be a finished game, but at least something interesting to try for other people. Because it's more the discussions and the contacts it gives you sometimes that is more important than the finished products,
Is there anything else that you wanted to share about the future of spatial computing? Anything that inspires you that's coming up on the horizon?
I would say what excites me is that the medium is still alive after 10 years, And there are still new people coming on board and people creating great original content. I wish I could go to all the festivals and all the conferences to see more content. It's not always possible. But there are still like new pioneers and people experimenting with it, which is great. I think it's going to be a long haul. People have said that before, and it's been 10 years already. Some people predicted it was going to explode in 3 years. I never believed that. This is a field where there is a lot of hype, most of the time. So you have to kind of see through the hype and see what's going to stick and what's going to stay for the long run. So I would just say, like, if you are in it, be in it for the long run and try to stick with it through the good and the bads, because that's the field that still has a lot of ups and downs. And the technology is always changing, and the tools and the plugins and constant, updates and this and that. So it's still not established, basically after 10 years, it's still not established. And just don't be impatient. And those things are still considered experimental. I think there are great applications. I'm really excited about all the medical applications, the training applications. I'm not sure it's going to be only for entertainment. There are some fields where it's really going to be like mental health or travel for older people who cannot travel anymore, or whoever cannot travel. There are great applications. And we just need more people to keep doing it and believing in it, because I'm still convinced it's an awesome medium, and we haven't explored all of it at all. And there is still way more to be explored, to invent and to improve this medium. So I'm still excited about the future. Nowadays, I'm more like helping my students and developing things, but definitely anything having to do with like mental health, resilience, and embodiment. I'm going to keep working on that aspect. So we'll see what comes up.
Thank you so much for joining me on Zero to Start today. It was a lot of fun to catch up and get your insights into your journey.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
I hope you're as inspired as I am by Nathalie's success, and keep in mind her points about commitment, patience, and how important it is to listen to your inner voice. I like what she said about life's big dreams and decisions aren't always going to be rational or validated. So go with the flow, take calculated risks, and leverage your skills towards the next wave of innovation. Be sure to check the show notes for how to connect with Nathalie on LinkedIn and for links to Northeastern's Game Science and Design Master's Program and more. Thanks to all our listeners and subscribers across the globe for your continued support. Until next time, happy installing.